All right.
Oh, I like it.
Wow, the crowd is no burning face. I would like to call to order a regular meeting of the Board of Education, June 18th, 2019 at 7:01 p.m. Kathy, could you please call the roll?
Katie Barr.
I'm here.
Blakely.
Here.
Rummel.
Here.
Gaspar.
Here.
Locke. Here. Lowe.
Present.
Meisler.
Here. We had that exciting meeting, so I didn't ask anyone to lead the pledge, so I'll do it. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, decorations, are there any items to be removed from or added to the agenda tonight?
There are not.
Excellent, and we do not, I don't believe, have any of our, we don't have student ambassadors. Todd Swanson's not here tonight, and we don't have any public comments, so we will jump right to committee updates if anyone has them. I don't know if anyone's committees have met since the last meeting.
I think John went to my meeting.
I went to Chris's, but if Mark wants to say anything about it, there was just an update, basically, right? So, anyway, so I have nothing now.
Okay. Well, then we are moving quickly on to our consent agenda, which is an opportunity for us to approve all of our routine business items in one vote. All of the details are listed in the board book, but we'll ask Mr. Pierce to stop talking to Mr. Lacy and go through the consent agenda.
I can do that. 4.1 and 4.2 is the approval of the May 21st, 2019 regular and closed session meeting minutes. 4.3 is our personnel report. 4.4 is payroll and bills. 4.5, destruction of our closed session recordings on December 19th, 2017. You'll note in 4.6 we have a couple of donations. We have an anonymous donation for some adaptive things in our PE and PT departments, and then we have a large donation from our boosters as they continue their promised donation with our turf fields. 4.7, classroom use agreement with Mid-Valley. 4.8, disbursement of our property tax rebate. 4.9, designation of our authorized depositories. 4.10, approval of the BHS boiler bid. 4.11, approval of the new maintenance trucks. 4.12, approval of the disposal of surplus property. 4.13, certification of hazardous bus routes. 4.14, approval of the AGS exterior building repair. 4.15 is the annual support renewal for our VMware. 4.16 is the yearbook contract with Johnston's. 4.17 is the approval of chiller maintenance at Batavia High School. 4.18 is the approval of the student handbook for 1920. And we close with 4.19 is the approval of the consent agenda.
I just have a quick question.
I was going to ask if there were any questions.
Yeah, sorry. The booster donation, is that 3 of 5 or 4 of 5?
It's
3 or 4.
it's
Or 3 of...
4 of 6 if you count their first $200,000 payments.
Oh, okay.
It's 3 of 5 of their $60,000 payments. So there's 2 $60,000 payments that are still out
So
there.
2 more after this, okay.
2 more $60,000 payments, yes.
Beautiful. Any other items for clarification, question, or removal from the consent agenda?
On the chimney at
Yes?
AGS, is it just being kept off, Mark?
Completely removed, ground up.
Oh, from the ground up?
Correct.
Okay.
And there was, John, you had one other question about the hazardous bus routes, and there was an error before that said 2 of those bus routes were newly hazardous, but that was an error. It's correct in the board book right now.
Okay.
All of those are our existing bus routes, same as last year.
Okay.
So no new ones.
No new ones.
No new ones.
Same as last year? Same as last year.
And then you do about the eligibility in the handbook?
We didn't change the handbook yet, but yes, that part is no longer a requirement. We'll have to
Okay,
update that.
all right.
About now that we don't have RMS football, that's owned by the district, that changes that part of the eligibility in the student handbook.
Oh, right. Okay.
That's all for me.
Any other questions? All right, then I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Moved by Gaspar, second by Locke. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, consent agenda passes. Next item on our agenda are our reports. I will pass that over to Dr. Hitchens.
The first two are recurring reports, the FOIA requests and the treasurer's reports. The third one is Brad's report. Brad can answer any questions about the per capita. So I would entertain, or the library per capita, I would entertain any questions about any of those reports right now. Brad, is there anything you need to add to the per capita?
Not the per capita report is a requirement of the pretty small grant that we get on a per pupil basis for our students that goes to our LRCs. They use them for a variety of materials that they use in the libraries, the school libraries. Most of those have, this year, were electronic resources, getting kids more access to resources as they have their devices.
For example, I guess.
Databases would probably be the biggest piece, giving kids quality, high quality, vetted materials that they can have access to, and also having the ability to search not only our databases, but our Batavia Public Library has a large number of databases that we try and coordinate those so that we're not duplicating services, but teaching kids the skills of searching databases, since there's a lot of stuff out there on the internet. I don't know.
No, I think
But
one of
giving
the
them
big
that
grants
high quality
was
piece
a
is really important to
database.
us.
So that's why I was just.
Databases
yeah.
are a big part of what our LRCs are trying to beef up in their libraries.
Thank you.
If there's no other questions about the library report, the policy first reading, we get, back in February and March, press updated their policies for us, and we've been slowly going through them. There's 2 policies that still remain that we need to bring, 3 policies that need to remain to bring to your attention. One of them is 7100. We still have a transportation policy out there and a emergency operations policy that we need to review. Other than that, these are the last 3 policies. One of them is on the powers and duties of the school board, and just a minor change, replacing the word discipline with behavior. Facilities management, the policy never talked about the 10-year life safety, which is a requirement. And then under school accountability, the climate survey is now required annually rather than every other year. And then the 2 procedures that we put in there are the threshold dollar that when we select professionals, we only have to bring it to the board for a higher dollar amount. That number changed in the law from 25,000 to 40,000, and it does go up by CPI every year. And then the other procedural change that we would like to make is in regards to the Securities Exchange Commission. There are some rules that when we have to disclose information when we're doing our financial transactions, and some of those disclosures have changed. So I would recommend that we comply with the Securities Exchange Commission rule.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea.
Yeah.
Probably a good idea.
Yeah, there was one more that Brad gave me that didn't make its way here. That's the 7100 that I apologize. That was my gap. He gave me an update. I'll bring it next time. It's 7100. So you'll see an additional first reading next time.
And just so the board's aware that change is a change in school code that requires for 9th graders a dental examination. So that's a different thing. It's publicized on our webpage. We've communicated that to parents, but we need to update our policy to align with a 9th grade dental examination is now required to enter high school.
It's been required though.
It's been about 6 months to a year. We've had dental examinations at other grades, but they
Yeah.
moved it to 9th grade.
Okay.
I was gonna say, I think that we needed a question.
So I'll put it on the agenda for next month, the dental one. That was really the only change
That's
to that
really the
policy. So that would be, if you want to consider this to be the first reading, I'll let you guys decide if you need 2 more board meetings to adopt it, or if you're going to be ready to adopt it next month. I'll send that to you, and I'll actually update the board agenda item as well, and we'll bring that back with the others for a second reading in July. So do you have questions about any of those policy changes?
No, those were more impressive.
Right, the ones that we pretty much have to do.
Done.
One of the board monitoring pieces. You guys have many things that you monitor throughout the year. You have a calendar of monitoring, and the stipend committee had promised you to come back and circle back with you and give an update on their work. They've been pretty busy over the last year. So Steve worked with the stipend committee to come up with this report?
Yeah, this is from the last couple of years. I think it's fairly straightforward as you read through it. You may have questions. I'm happy to answer those. I think that probably the most important essential work we did was really up front, where we defined our core values and what we would always kind of go back to. I listed those for you. You can click into the adjusted table that we created. You can see some of the criteria that we had for our clubs. I know that one of the guidelines that was given to us was to take the current dollars that were being spent on stipends and relook at all those and reprioritize and try to make things maybe potentially a little bit more equitable, provide more access to students. And I was really impressed with the work that the committee did. You can see there's a listing of the different stipends that were added that came out of this with no new dollars attached to it. And so that took a lot of creativity, it took a lot of listening, it took a lot of hard work. I think that it's important I think the members of this committee should be commended because this work was not easy. There were a lot of difficult conversations that staff members had to have with their colleagues, which is never enjoyable or fun. And they did a very, very fine job of doing that. I did mention, as actually we really enjoyed, we put this together, this information, our last stipend committee meeting, and when you're kind of in the midst of it, maybe you don't realize all the work you did, but I think when we look back, it was kind of enjoyable for that team to look back and say, wow, we got a lot of stuff done. But having said that, our work is not over. One of the directives I recall from the board was really one of the outcomes that was desired was about the evaluations for stipend activities, and it talks about that in the language. It talks about evaluation of the stipend activities, and that's been a pretty difficult. Not that we're going to get there, but we just plain and simple, we ran out of time. There were some obstacles and speed bumps along the way that we didn't anticipate that hung us up on some of that work, and so that will be our top priority as we go to next year. We've updated and added and changed our processes and some of the different things we do there, which I think will streamline how we do business. But overall, I would say that this committee really functioned like a team. A lot of listening to each other, a lot of diverse thoughts and ideas that really came together, and we're pretty proud of our outcome. So I don't know if you have questions, thoughts, additional insight that you'd like to give to me to share with that committee, but we're excited about what we've accomplished, and we'll continue this work because one of the things that we really want to be is continue to be student-centered. That was one of our core values, and as things come along, different activities and clubs change, and we want to continue to listen to that and afford our students access and opportunities to experience a lot of these things. I don't know if this was stated implicitly in here, but everyone should know that previous to all of this work, it was very random, especially at the elementary level, in terms of what was offered to kids. We've standardized that, where there are certain clubs that are offered at all 6 of our elementary schools, as opposed to kids at this school got this opportunity and kids at this school didn't get that opportunity. I think that was really important from an equity standpoint. We've also done what I believe is in the club area especially, we've at least got some parameters and a criteria, where in the past it was very difficult to look at some of these things and really understand, well, why is that placed here and why is that not placed here and things like that. And the team did a nice job of putting that together. So there's a lot of good things that happened, and we still have some work to do, and we'll always have work to do, but overall, the last 2 years, I think we have had very good success and a good outcome.
Well, I think from what you're saying, you did a nice job and everybody worked together on it. My one concern is, and I brought it up to Lisa this morning, and I think I've also mentioned it as you just did, about the evaluation. and I know you ran out of time. I think there has to be, and it has to also be some informal ones, just to make sure things are going on at separate times, because in your writing here, you have like before and after the season. So I want to make sure there's things that are happening, especially with the sports during the season. But, you know, it's probably being done in some degree, but I just want to make sure, same with clubs and stuff, walk in and there's the criteria on how many students they said you're going to have, and if it's way less, then why are we having it? And maybe this is something that should be looked at every 3 to 5 years, just to see how instead of waiting and then trying to lump it all together again, because I know it's a hard work. So thank you.
Steve, I have a question. A couple of questions. Thank you, and the committee. I know it was a lot of work, and appreciate it. You mentioned there were some obstacles to creating this evaluation. Could you share maybe a couple of those obstacles and how you see overcoming them?
Standardizing the pay schedule was the first one, wasn't it? Like the actual other work that the committee.
Well, so yeah, I mean, it's complicated. We piloted a certain tool that we devised at the high school, and the feedback we got back from the people that were a part of it, and then even from some people who just saw it, was that it was too similar to our actual teacher evaluation tool, and there was some interesting takes on that. The language that the stipend committee has actually talks about, it doesn't talk about evaluating the people who actually run the stipend. It talks about the stipend committee is empowered to evaluate the stipend. So that even creates its own element. Now, we believe in the stipend committee that if you're evaluating the actual activity or the stipend, that's a reflection of the coach or the supervisor of a club or whatever. But there's some sticky language that I think we have to tease out a little bit. I think the other thing you have to remember is that any of this stipend work that we do, when we complete it, we have to run it through the BE Exec Board, and they're very open and very supportive of this work, but that adds another layer of people who are doing oversight, then give us feedback, and then we have to make some adjustments and changes. So I would say that what we ran into is that took a lot longer than we had anticipated. Some of that back and forth and that interaction, and so that slowed us down at really nobody's fault. That's just how it ended up playing out. Because I'll be honest, we had a tool that we were excited about that we thought was going to be ready, because we had some people test it out with some decent feedback. But when it really came down to it, we weren't in a position to move forward because there's still some various things we have to work with our association on to get it right. So, it's like anything, it's a process and just takes time.
I think that, I know from my perspective, that's an important aspect that we have that in place. Also, there was a question, and I can't find it now, there was, what was it called? Wild Card Club? Is that an actual club, or is that just any kind of club?
It's any kind of club. So
Okay.
Again, to allow some freedom, and that different schools might have had one thing that they did that nobody else did. We allow for one wild card,
Okay. I was just...
as opposed to the standard like K-Kids and Cardio Club and Art Club.
Okay. No, I
Yes.
was just trying to...
It's exactly what you thought it was.
Yep.
It's
Okay.
really funny, I think it did not give us that.
No, I thought it was a Magic Club.
Right, or something. I do want to say, Steve, I know that these, the conversations you guys had to have were hard, because it's really hard to go talk to someone about that they're going to perhaps not get as much for their stipend because there's not as many kids. And it sounds like you handled those with, the group handled them really well.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really excited at the fact that we added these stipends at no additional cost to the board, if I'm correct, right?
That's
We
correct.
just moved things
It
around.
was all within the same
What our
knowledge.
charge was,
Year to year.
so that's really amazing, and I know it can be really hard for colleagues to have those conversations or make those analyses to their colleagues, so you guys did amazing, and yeah, it's good to hear that you'll keep working at it.
May I ask 2 quick questions?
Of course.
You had mentioned earlier that you're considering new activities as they come up. Is that a specific plan that's in place, or does the committee evaluate those on a individual basis as they come up, and that's what part of
It's part of our process, yes.
Okay.
So on an annual basis, we do that. We have a form they fill out, then we look at it. We look at what do we currently have, what do we not have, do we have existing dollars that we can actually spend to fund these things. As a part of this, and we're not 100% of the way there, but it is also a look back to say, hey, the current stipends we have for some of these clubs, are we still having students participate in this, or is there one child involved? Or, you know, and again, it gets really hard because for that one child, that club is probably really important to them, or those 3 kids. But we also have to say, all right, it's again just goes to the point that like there's always hard decisions to be made, you know, because there's not a perfect science to any of this. So yes, there is, to answer your question, yes, there's kind of an annual process where we go through and evaluate and make decisions.
And have any funding changes been made to the pool of money, or is it pretty much just how the contract is?
The current funding was laid out in the BEA board collective bargaining agreement that was approved. So we're, as you know, we're in the midst of bargaining. So, you know, our contract is done June 30th of 2019. So things could change, which could be some infusion of dollars. It really depends bargain to bargain.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
So I have one question, sorry. So some sports have different grade level teams, so football, baseball, soccer, for instance. But I see head football just 1. So would that mean that there were the head football coach, meaning the varsity level, or?
I'm assuming that you're looking at, let me open this up.
I mean, you're in the schedule, right? Yeah.
You're in the stipend schedule. And what you're seeing with the number would be how many stipends there are. So if you're looking at column L, I assume?
Yeah, that's one example.
Yes, that would mean there is 1 head football coach at Batavia High School.
So for K, head baseball, that would be just the varsity.
Correct.
Okay, and the rest would be considered assistant.
Right.
Okay.
And
So if you're
somewhere else in the letter.
if you're like the sophomore head coach,
Yeah.
you're considered an assistant coach. So at the high school level, the head coach is the varsity coach who really oversees all of the programs, and then everybody else is really an assistant coach.
Okay.
That's why you see under assistant coaches, you see the varying numbers.
For all artists, underneath the F, so you just have to find them. They're in different levels.
Any
A lot
other
of
questions? Yeah, that's a lot of work.
So the football RMS would fall off then?
Yes,
Okay.
since we no longer have that, that will be
Steve,
gone.
do you
Oh, funny,
think
that's
that the evaluation process is tricky because of who will be doing the evaluations or what is to be evaluated?
Probably the latter. I think that when we jumped into the, and again, there are, at our high school and middle school, as an example, there are, it's not as formalized as it needs to be, in my opinion, you know, as it needs to be, but they have a process where they're with coaches. In terms of a lot of the clubs at the high school, because of the sheer number, we actually have a staff member that's a part of that. That gets a little tricky because it's a BEA member who would be potentially evaluating another BEA member. So like that's an example maybe of some of these hurdles or obstacles that you have. I think though that when you think about, and again, the evaluation process for this is not going to be as comprehensive as we have for like our licensed teachers, but I know Brad was a part of this. It took us years and years and years when the state changed their regulation for us to actually have an evaluation process for our teachers.
Right.
That was years of work, and I can't, countless hours. And even along the way, I'm still a part of that committee along with Brad. We're still making tweaks and adjustments along the way. So I guess what we learned was a little bit of a lesson is that this takes more time than we thought. And I would say it's really more about, it's not so much about who's doing the evaluation, it's just about what exactly will it look like, how comprehensive is it, because you also have a capacity issue with just time of, you know, our administrators, generally speaking, it's a lot of work for them to evaluate all of the staff members within their buildings just for their annual evaluation, then which includes multiple evaluations, informal and formal along the way. then you add in all of these different clubs and sports, and so we have to figure out a way to be comprehensive but not overly time consuming. And so, you know, those are kind of some of the hurdles that we have in developing something like this.
I know that this was a board driven type project. 2 years now I've been doing this.
2 years, correct.
2 years. So do you feel that in regards to the evaluations that you would need more board guidance? Because I kind of agree with you that to have every single club and sport evaluated would be very difficult, but there's also sports and activities where parents pay additional money to have their student involved. So maybe those areas are something we look at before we're looking at something that's not, or something that has less kids. I guess, is this something you would like help from us on?
I don't know that we're at that point. I think if the board would like to give us additional, direction, if that's something that there was consensus in doing, we are certainly open to that. I would like to give, next year, I'm very confident that we will have a solid outcome.
Okay.
I don't exactly know what it will be, what it will look like. We've tried a few things, and we have a few things that are going on at our high school and middle school, or high school and middle school level. But I think that we can tackle this next year. Again, we didn't realize, I would say, how much work it was going to take to communicate all of these messages with staff members, and we did a lot of that last spring. Fast forward to this past fall, then there was still a little bit more work that had to be done that from kind of a relationship, collaboration, cleanup, give people the opportunity to come and kind of say, hey, this is what I feel this should be at, here's why. That just took a lot more time than we really anticipated, and so that was part of the story in terms of obstacles, why we didn't get it done. So I really believe we've kind of gotten through that, and we have a product that's kind of established. We'll add some new things, I'm sure, or maybe make a few modifications, but that's not going to be the bulk of our work this next year. Really, the bulk of our work and our number one priority is to really nail this portion of it down, the evaluation and kind of oversight of these programs. So that will be our number one priority this year. So I think we can get it done.
Well, if you feel like you need a report directive.
Yeah, and if we got to a sticking point, Tina, being honest, if we got to one of those sticking points where we were struggling with it, I would come back to you guys and say, hey, we're stuck here, can you provide some direction for us?
Thanks.
Do you know the breakdown off the top of your head? Like when, back in the dark ages, when I was not a part of a district, I was a coach, and they call them emergency coaches. What's the percentage breakdown of in-district employees that are taking advantage of these stipends versus out of district?
We call them vendor coaches now?
Vendor coaches?
Yeah. I don't know the exact number. I could find it, but
I just didn't know if you had a ballpark off the top of your head. I was curious.
The vast majority are our employees.
Okay.
I would say at the elementary level, mostly at the middle school level. The usual outliers are like some assistant coaches in sports, probably more specialized type of sports, wrestling as an example.
Lacrosse.
What'd you say?
Lacrosse is one.
Lacrosse would be one, right? But it's a very small number. We, in a perfect world, we want our employees doing many of these stipend activities as possible.
Right, and personally I found myself less concerned about the evaluation process if a majority of our stipend employees are already district employees. It's more the outliers that you want a solid evaluation. Yeah.
Any other questions on that? All right. Here's our favorite topic. I bet budget is Tony. It is.
I'd like to invite Lindsay to come and take a seat at the table. Really for two reasons. One, to recognize her work. She's been instrumental in producing this budget as Director of Finance. And two, in case there are questions that you have that I can't answer, she's well equipped to help us answer those questions. So this is the preliminary budget, and I emphasize the word preliminary. Last year we went right to the tentative budget in July, and so we're trying to give you a preview of what you'll see coming to you to put on display in July. So if you recall the process, you're obligated by law to put tentative budget on display for 30 days prior to adoption. So our plan typically is we put the tentative budget on display for everybody to see in July. We hold a public hearing in August, and we adopt the budget in September, which is a full quarter into the fiscal year, and that's just how we roll in Illinois before we actually have a budget. There's a lot of things that we don't necessarily know yet, and we're piecing those things together. But this preliminary budget is our first step in the process, and if you've had an opportunity to peruse the details here and see them for the first time, we too have just seen them really for the first time in a full form where we can actually see all the different angles that we use to look at the budget. So we have many questions, as I'm sure you do, and to the extent that we can answer them tonight, we certainly will. And we'll do our homework on the others that we can't answer, because we certainly have questions about where things line up here as well. The other thing I want to point out is that being that this is a preliminary budget and that we are currently in negotiations with the Batavia Education Association, the expenditures you can expect will be higher in the final budget than they will in the preliminary and the tentative. So that those negotiations are still underway, and we can't account for them as yet. We are still bargaining. In summary, our revenues are projected to go up by 1.3%, excluding our on-behalf payments, which I'll get to in just a moment. But overall, the revenues that we have direct control over are going up by a reasonable amount. The vast majority of that increase that we're projecting at this time comes from local property taxes. So while we're seeing increased state funding, 2.8% more, it's really only about $150,000 more than we received last year. The vast majority of the increase comes from property taxes. We've gotten some news from the state. They passed the budget on time again this year for the second year in a row, which is exciting. There's some news there that we haven't fully processed yet, our categoricals, which are reimbursements for certain expenditures in prior years. We did an initial estimate when we put these numbers together in March and April. We've got to revise them with the new state budget. So those numbers will likely go up as well too. Also, at this point in the year, we have what are called preliminary allocations from federal grants. They oftentimes come back and give us additional allocations once they figure out where their money is going. So basically all the federal grants, we do expect that they're going to go up to the same levels or similar levels that we saw in prior years. Expenditures going up by 1.8%, so a little bit more than those revenues at this point in time. And as I mentioned, those revenues we do expect to go up, and we do expect these expenditures to go up. And while they do, the expenditure increases will outpace the revenues, we'll still have a surplus. Spending on salaries at the moment is expected to increase by 2.1%, and costs for employee benefits in totality will go by 8%, driven primarily by increasing medical premiums at average of 11% increase. 4.6 more staff. Student enrollment declined, however, and so our pupil to student staffing ratio overall will decline from 8.8 to 8.7 students per employee. I mentioned those on behalf contributions earlier. We do recognize them in the budget. We're required to by law, and the reason being is that they are a liability of the school board, and it's basically the contributions that the state of Illinois makes for the teachers' retirement system. In fiscal 18, that number was 15 million, or we expected it to be 15 million. It turned out to be 17 million. In 2019, this year that we're just finishing on June 30th, TRS has notified us that it's going to jump to 27 million. And we expect a similar number for 2020. So given that that number has increased so dramatically between fiscal years, it kind of throws off some of the numbers that you'll see in subsequent pages. Just keep that in mind. We try to call that out to the extent possible and make sure that people realize that and understand what the mechanics are that are at play. Now, how does that number get calculated? Well, it comes from TRS. It depends on our portion of the pension liability. It depends on how the actuaries calculate the liability, and it also depends on how much the state actually pays. And so it isn't a number that we come up with, it's one that's provided to us. But it is, in actuality, is we're required to recognize these liabilities through the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, because it's best practice to recognize your net position in terms of your total assets, those sorts of things. It's good to know. It also points out to the extent to which our pension system needs some work, where we're generating these liabilities that come out of other people's pockets in reality too. That's pretty much it for the highlights. There's a lot of other details. We're, of course, booking the $60,000 that the Bulldog Boosters will contribute toward their pledge. It will be the fourth of 5 annual payments in 2020. They just paid the, you just recognized and approved the third. So we're getting closer to finishing that pledge. Returning another $9 million in bond principal and interest payments, leaving only $50 million outstanding. And the other good news is that our physical health has dramatically improved in the last 4 years. We went from financial early warning in 2015 to financial recognition in the last couple of years. And for the second straight year, we won't have to issue tax anticipation warrants for, as far as we can tell, the first time or maybe the second time in 30 years. So that's excellent news.
I have 2 questions.
Certainly.
First one being, and they're all clarifying, first one being the on-behalf payments, that's what would be pushed back to us if we had to carry our own pension obligations, correct?
Yes. Not in a given year per se. Normal cost is right about 10% of salaries in a year. They're playing catch-up right now in terms of what
And
they
that's why it
have been
looks
paying,
bigger?
and so how they figure out the total liability and what's been paid and our portion of that is a factor, but normal cost is what we would pay, meaning in a given year, what you paid in salaries, here's how much the annuities would cost, and that's roughly about 10% of salaries, and so we can expect that that's what the normal cost would
So
come back
that's a
to us.
scarier number than I may have to worry about.
Yeah.
Okay. Second question, I cannot remember, how do we decide how much the property tax rebate is? Is it a set
I
amount?
just
or
pick
is
a
it-
number.
I
It's,
feel like paying this year.
we are obligated to pay it, and it's a good question, and this year it went from, I think, 680 to 740 in terms of 680,000 to 740,000 if memory serves, and it's calculated based upon the amount of tax revenue that a particular parcel of that property generates, and we have to pay 90% of it less the bond and interest
So you had a wonky
taxes.
formula. I just couldn't remember if it was a formula or a set amount a year. And third question, when are our bonds paid off?
That's a good question. It's 2020.
5 or 6?
26 or 26 or 2027. I think it's the, one
Yeah.
of those 2 years.
Lindsay knows.
Does she know?
Of course she does.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's getting close.
Yeah? All right. Those are my 3 questions. Anyone else? We want a few minutes to digest. We perused it earlier. Dug
Days
deep.
to digest.
So you'll
Ready
see, you
next?
have an opportunity to see it again next month. And if you do come up with any questions, please, by all means, send them our way and we have to answer them.
And I know it's hard to ask a lot of questions about something that we know is just a
It
moving
is really
target.
exciting.
You know, I like that. All right. Then we have one item on our agenda tonight for action, which is our BATV lease.
The past 10 years, BATV, they use our space at the high school to run their operations, their offices, and their studio is there. And they do have a lease with us. And the current lease hadn't been touched for 10 years, and it auto-renewed every year. And it had a 3-year, if we wanted to get out of that lease, or they wanted to get out of the lease, it had a 3-year cancellation. And so we've been looking at the terms of the lease. There have been some, like some of the terminology was incorrect, some of the policy references, some of the location references were incorrect. So it was time to modernize that lease. And we asked Brad to work with the BATV board to do that, and he did that. And they're agreeable to this option. I think I covered most of the highlights, right? It's a 3-year lease instead of it was a 5-year lease with a 3-year
It was a
cancel.
10-year lease.
Oh, we had it for 10 years.
We had it for 10 years, yeah. Yeah, the terms have changed slightly just to keep us talking more as partner organizations to make sure that we're moving forward with that partnership. The rent went up from $1 to $100 annually, and that's
That
just
makes us
because
look like really bad landlords.
it actually cost us money to invoice somebody for $1 and then process all of that, so that's why that went up. And then worked with Tony to update some of the references and make sure that the terms were agreeable to both sides. So if the board approves it, we can sign that and then have BATV sign that.
Any questions about this very complex lease? All right, then I would entertain a motion to approve the lease with BATV as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Baybar, second by Locke. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, it's approved. That was our last item for action. We'll move on to staff and board comments. Dr. Hitchens, will let you start.
I don't have any comments tonight, thank you.
All right. Jen Gaspar, you want to start tonight?
Okay, thanks for everyone for getting information for me, and Lisa for the meeting this morning. Appreciate the information. Kathy for the printouts. And just be safe out there with all the kids at home now, out playing, so slow down. A lot of signs that went up, so just be safe. Thank you.
All right, Aaron? Nothing from me. Bob?
Just want to say thanks. Summer, late spring and summer is a really interesting time. I've seen a lot of posts of caterpillars turning into butterflies, and I associate that with a late spring, early summer thing. And I think our board work, we kind of do a lot of that as well. We had a meeting tonight where we started to look back at some of the things we've done and discussed how we grow moving forward. So kind of a cool little end of spring, beginning of summer ritual for us too. So excited to see how we grow the rest of the summer and how all the students and staff have grown over the summer when they come back. So have fun. Thanks.
Tina?
I got nothing.
Sue?
One of my committees I sit on, not affiliated with the school board, but with Batavia, is Flag Day. And last Friday was Flag Day, in case you didn't know. And the city of Batavia, in conjunction with the Fox Valley Patriotic Organization, is building a Flag Day monument. And I just wanted to thank the students from Batavia High School that came out and performed for us. They did a wonderful job. We had the chromatics, we had the lawnmowers, the girl band that came from the high school that came and performed, and a brass quintet. So it was very wonderful that they came and helped us out and celebrate and raise some money for the monument. Have a great summer.
All right, I have nothing to add. We do have closed session on our agenda tonight, but no action, correct?
Correct.
All right, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn to closed session to discuss collective negotiating matters between the public body and its employees or their representatives, or deliberations concerning salary schedules for one or more class of employees, to the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the public body or legal counsel for the public body, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee of the public body or against legal counsel for the public body to determine its validity.
So moved.
Moved by Gaspar. Second by Lowe. All in favor? Aye. All right, we will adjourn to closed session with no action to follow.